consoles, frame rates, video games. They're more than a linear path. They are a prism of endless possibility, where simple change in platform can branch off into infinite realities. I am the reviewer. I am your guide through the worst of these titles. Come with me and ponder the question, what shit?
I do not like the 2003 Hulk movie. Most of the characters are flat and dull throughout, the acting runs the gambit of how much NyQuil the actors are on, nothing really happens until the ending, and the comic book style editing, while ambitious, is a wildly stupid looking misfire more often than not. Hey, how many angles on this helicopter do we need? I say 10! I say at least 10 shots of this one helicopter! It only comes to life in the last half hour or so of a 2-hour and 20-minute movie, with some fun action coming in just about the time you start to realize that the Hulk hasn't actually done anything superheroic. Not unless you count punching a few mutant poodles in pitch darkness to try and cover the CG, and killing the villain by screaming him to death. I've seen people lately start defending the movie for its psychological elements, but the only vaguely psychological elements I can see are, hey, did you know that repressed memories are a thing? Weird, huh? And most of what I think is intended as the psychology is just people sitting around confused and irritated because they can't remember what the plot's about. When your movie is 40 minutes shorter than The Batman and feels like it's longer, that's not good. As always, if you like it, more power to you. Media is meant to be enjoyed, because we're actually here because the superhero movie where nothing happens got a video game adaptation. And how could they possibly adapt the pulse-pounding action and thrills of Ang Lee's Hulk movie? Well, at least I'll have an extra copy to smash if this game sucks. The game opens with a sequence of Bruce coming across a gas station in the desert where looking into a mirror pisses him off enough that he becomes the Hulk. The military, led by some new guy General Riker, comes to attack and we get a combat tutorial. You press B for a 3-hit punch combo, you have a punch that you can charge up for extra damage, you can throw Y into your punch combo for some uppercut moves and thunderclaps, and X will pick up stuff to throw or bash around. You also hold R to target enemies to improve the accuracy of attacks, and as you fight you build up a rage meter that you can use to trigger big area effect insta-kill moves. You can also knock missiles back at the thing that fired them, but you won't because the timing is super finicky and you only fight tanks in one level out of 21 anyway. Kinda baffling. And as far as the tutorials tell you, that's all there is to combat. That's all the tutorial tells you. Remember that it's going to be important later. Anyway, Bruce's little skirmish in the desert turns out to have been a dream sequence. The game is set about a year after the movie, which ended with Bruce fleeing to South America to lie low and hide from the military. For all of a few months, apparently. Now he's back in the States looking for a cure for his Hulkness.
My career, Betty, my entire life, infected by this disease.
Okay, that few seconds of monologue has more characterization and dimension for Bruce than the whole damn movie did. Bruce is working with a scientist named Dr. Crawford, who's invented a gamma orb that'll remove the Hulk once and for all, except Dr. Crawford is obviously evil, and instead the orb starts duplicating the Hulk's powers. Crawford turns himself into another Hulk called Ravage, and he runs off to build an army, and you have to chase him. The story is paper thin, as you spend several levels just chasing Ravage through the city, find out where he's hiding, and then spend several more levels chasing him again, all the while being attacked by unknown soldiers and... Really? Really? You brought back the stupid-ass Hulk dogs as a main enemy type? It almost made sense in the movie since Absorbing Man was a lone nutcase with no access to proper henchmen. Why is everyone's first reaction to seeing the Hulk in this universe, "I'ma make me some pet mutant doggos"? The game is primarily a beat-em-up where you fight a whole bunch of enemies in very simple linear levels, which is unfortunate because the game's combat is, well, dookie. The vast bulk of the combat is just done by mashing B to launch the same one attack pattern endlessly to pummel the enemies. You have other moves, but frankly, they barely work. You have a grab, but it's very slow and doesn't seem to deal a whole lot of damage, and there aren't many weapons to chuck or swing at enemies. You have a thunderclap to stun enemies, but it barely does jack. You have a jumping attack with what feels like wholly inconsistent and unreliable range. It just feels like all your attacks blow ass, except for mashing B. And the funny thing is, between playing this, I've been working my way through the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Cowabunga collection. Figure I'd keep my gaming to green superheroes. And this collection has a lot of games with only one attack button that you mash through waves of samey enemies. So why does it work there and not here? Well, the Ninja Turtles games have fast-paced, high-intensity action, whereas Hulk kind of plods along with slow progression. The Turtles games have great and satisfying sound design for instant gratification with punchy sound effects, while the Hulk barely even makes a sound when he lands punches. The man who can break planets in half slams into his foes with all the force and fury of a whiffing fart. And the Turtles games feel more like they reward skill. You get further by dodging attacks until you can reach full health refills that are very carefully placed at critical points. Whereas Hulk, it feels almost impossible to avoid damage. You have no dodge move or block, a lot of the enemies fire projectiles, the ones that don't tend to be utter damage sponges that bum rush you like the Hulk dogs, and sometimes pricks with shields and tasers just swamp you and block you from running and hemorrhage all your health away. Not to mention you have no good ranged or area effect attacks for crowd control or to make landing hits easier. You're forced to get into swinging range of exactly one goon at a time and get shot in the ass by everyone else. But another big problem is the camera, which works on fixed positioning and cannot be controlled or aimed. Fixed cameras are common in 3D beat-em-ups, but here it's so poorly implemented, you'll never see the entire combat arena at once. You will get shot from off-screen a lot, further kneecapping that whole punch rockets with perfect timing mechanic that you won't be using. But on the bright side, if the combat ever gets so dull and unrewarding that you just want to skip it, well then good news! You can! The vast bulk of rooms in the game's levels do not block off progress until you've killed all the enemies. You almost always have the option of just running past baddies and dashing straight for the exit. There are some entire levels where you can just run straight to the end and the game does not give a shit. And I'm not sure they intended to give the game purely optional combat because there are absolutely zero rewards of any kind for actually fighting people. There is no XP or upgrade system, there are no collectibles or currency or item drops. The only reward you might get for a fight is a few meager health pickups, except you probably took more damage than the health drops will replenish anyway. They made a beat-em-up game that doesn't actually care if you beat 'em up! And worse yet, sometimes enemies will respawn infinitely so that you have to ignore baddies and just run ahead or else you'd be there forever. Who the hell came up with this? Was this designed on purpose? The game isn't purely combat though. A few of the levels are stealth sequences where you play as an untransformed Bruce Banner infiltrating a base without being detected. Except the stealth levels are stupid. It's designed as baby's first stealth game with no gadgets or tools or ability to cause distractions, just slow-moving and nearly deaf enemies with terrible eyesight and rock-simple patterns. All you do is park it behind a blatantly obvious hiding spot until any patrols walk past and you move on. Oh, and every now and then you have to hack a console by dragging letters and numbers to the spots you're directly told to drag them. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Batman Activity Center is laughing at you. After about 5 levels of wandering aimlessly through a city, you have your first boss fight, an energy vampire named Half-Life. Figures, the whole movie is about hunting down a free man. You can't punch Half-Life directly or else he absorbs your power and recovers health. Instead, you have to grab nearby items to throw or slam him into generators that electrocute him. So you beat the vampire that absorbs energy by hucking him into sources of energy. Sure, the boss fight throws into sharp focus a lot of the bigger problems with the combat, particularly that the Hulk is very slow. Almost all of Hulk's attacks, or even basic jumps, have sluggish animations and pauses before and after that make it very easy for enemies to interrupt everything that you do, making all of the game's combat feel clunky and sluggish and awkward. You grab a club weapon and go to swing it at Half-Life, and unless you time it extremely, ridiculously perfectly, he'll charge in and hit you before the attack finishes going off. You're trudging and poke-assing along while most of the game's enemies can friggin' dance around you, which doubly sucks in this boss fight because you need to use weapons to fight Half-Life, and every time you get hit, Hulk drops the item! So then you have to slowly lug your green ass over to another weapon, just hoping the boss doesn't move in for another attack. The fixed camera will also leave the boss off-screen for most of the fight, so that you just run into him on pure accident and take another huge hit. But the big problem here is the targeting system, which you desperately need for any of your attacks to aim worth a damn, and the lock-on system will consistently target random crap in the environment instead of the enemy that you need to attack. Oh, what's that? You want to throw a projectile at the boss that you're staring directly into and who can only be damaged with items and who's charging at you to siphon off tons of your health? Well, too bad, son! Because the targeting system's locked onto a pile of trash clear behind you instead, and good friggin' luck changing it! So, if Half-Life interrupts you every time you take a swing at him and you can't throw to save your life, how do you win this fight? With a lunging knockback attack that's triggered by holding a club, locking on, and moving directly towards your target. And no, the game doesn't tell you about this vitally critical move or how to do it, despite having multiple tutorials and it being pretty much the only attack that works on this boss. Guess that obscure little move just slipped the dev team's minds or something. Ravage has taken the Gamma Orb to Alcatraz, which, by the way, is one of the dumbest places to set up an evil lair since it's been a historical park and major tourist attraction since the 1970s! The bad guys have a hostage that they'll kill if the Hulk is detected, so you have another stealth level of enemies with dirt-simple patrols and who don't react at all to noises. Except in this level, you keep getting bitten hard in the ass by fixed cameras that will almost never show you the enemies that you need to avoid, so you can barely time or plan out any moves. And that's kind of vital in a stealth stage! The game tries to mitigate the shit camera with a first-person view that you can enter by holding L, which feels like a desperate last-second patch when they realized how terrible the camera was, but it barely helps since you can't move in first person, nor can you see around the obstacles that you'll be using for cover, so you have to stand out in the open, exposed, and vulnerable to use it. Oh, and you can sneak up on an enemy and press X to knock them out, only it barely seems to work, and is pretty much only used on this one guard that the game was explicitly designed to use it on. Alright, the path is clear to the level exit. I just have to— ah, shit! There was a guard way off screen, and now he's right on my ass! Guess I should be thankful the guards don't raise alarms when they're detected, or else they'd be— huh. Okay, never mind. I'm thankful that apparently enemies despawn when you cross checkpoints. About the only actual collectible that you sometimes find through exploration is a blue sphere that gives you an extra continue for that level. Like this room where you smash all the computers. You almost never actually need the extra continues, but it's kind of nice to— hey! Why did all the computers respawn? And holy shit, the Mauler twins from Invincible show up as enemies! Really annoying, ever-present, damage sponge enemies!
I am the original! The original. I am the original! You can always make him the original! I am the original!
This Alcatraz level ends with you locked in a room with no exit and seemingly never-ending waves of respawning enemies, leaving you wonder what in the hell you're supposed to do. The exit does eventually open up once you've killed several dozen enemies, including tons of maulers, with no end in sight. There's no good way to avoid taking shitloads of damage, and you barely get any health pickups, so good friggin' luck in this damn endurance battle! You have a rage mode that triggers when you've landed or taken enough hits, but it barely seems to do anything. It doesn't recover health, it doesn't spawn more items, it doesn't make you take less damage or unlock new moves or make you resilient to flinching. All it does is make your regular attacks a little stronger. I swear the only thing rage mode is good for is ending it early to do a big-ass instant kill shockwave attack. And if the shit health packs and endurance battles weren't big enough signs that the game wants you to die, sometimes you just get locked in a room with about 1 million damage sponge enemies and or Gatling guns, stuff you're guaranteed not to survive unless you get killed and use a continue. It just reeks of cheap and spiteful game design. The second boss is Madman, another generic Hulk clone. He's taken Hulk's girlfriend Betty Ross into a cell to irradiate and kill her because just stepping her into goop in her prison cell would have been too easy. You have to smash up a lot of equipment before the real fight starts, which necessitates more or less standing still, so Madman and all his missile-toting goons get a ton of free shots at you. This battle is maddening. Missile troopers and maulers spawn continuously throughout the entire fight, and Madman, despite having the same powers as the Hulk, is about 3 times faster than you, barely takes damage, and interrupts basically every attack that you try to use on him. Not helping is that the lock-on is once again useless because the room is lined with computers that do nothing! And the game will insist on locking onto them over the giant orange troll coming to rip out your intestines! Oh, I eventually beat this fight! You wanna know how?
Run away! Run away! Run away!
If you run in giant circles, the rocket troops and Madman will actually beat each other up, mostly without your interference. But past that, running away and chipping away at his health whenever he looked open was the only strategy that went anywhere. I know that dodge attacks and look for openings is pretty common sense design logic for a boss fight, but Half-Life you pretty much had to take head on, and running away like a coward doesn't feel like how the Hulk should fight. You save Betty, but she's already been irradiated, so Hulk has to abandon his siege on the enemy base to drag his girlfriend to a military gamma lab, because apparently they can suck the radiation out of Betty, but can't do the same to the Hulk and rid the world of what they're convinced is a mortal threat, because shut up! But upon his arrival, Hulk is captured by General Riker and the ingenious device of a simple shield over the base. Betty frees Bruce and tells him that the leader is making an army of gamma-radiated mutants to take over the world. Oh, cool. Who? Literally the first time the leader has been mentioned all game, like we're supposed to know who that is. And no, he's not from the movie, because that might have made the movie actually good. Bruce sneaks around the base in a disguise to find some chemicals and mix up an antidote to the sedative that he's been given, and this level is stupid easy. Bruce is wearing a disguise, which means that nobody notices you regardless of what you do. Nobody questions a common guard poking around highly sensitive equipment or running circles across the hallway to keep away from other people. You only alert the guards if you get about a foot away in direct sight, which is insanely easy to avoid. You took the stealth out of the stealth! Although given that I saw some buggy AIs walking down the steps backwards and getting stuck shuffling face first into walls, maybe the staff are just used to people acting screwy around here. And if this whole out-of-nowhere detour to the base and a whole 20-minute stage of just walking didn't feel enough like padding, next you have to smash your way back out of the base, which entails multiple rooms of being locked in with repeating waves of identical damage sponge robots in what feels like a desperate bid to pad the game to 4 hours. Luckily, I've learned that enemies have friendly fire turned on, and if you run in aimless circles for long enough, the enemies will shoot each other to death to thin themselves out for you. That's how I survived this screw you kill room where you're dumped in with like a dozen robots at once! Ah, sweet, a level where the Hulk fights a ton of tanks! Finally, the kinds of big enemies that you'd expect the Hulk to battle and have a blast! So anyway, you just run down this hall for a few minutes because the tanks have shields and it sucks we're all trying to fight them, and they don't actually stop you. And before you can escape the base, you have to fight yet another Hulk clone, a mutated soldier named Flux. Kind of thought the army would name him something threatening, like Killzone. So the leader is pumping out Hulks by the truckload, the military has its own Hulk soldier. Bruce's quest to stop the world from weaponizing his power kinda went to shit immediately, didn't it? Flux runs really fast, has tons of attacks that you can't counter in any way, and grabs you for massive damage if you get anywhere close to him. And the fight is built around smashing consoles to give him loads of free shots at you. You have to run like hell away, attacking the consoles with glancing hits, because a simple 3-hit combo keeps you still for too long to avoid taking damage, and then chuck him into a reactor, and then do that 6 times on 1 health bar. Oh, did I not mention that every single boss battle is a damn marathon? Every boss fight has 2 stages where they get a health refill, and you don't. and they barely take damage in the first place. There are slim to no health pickups throughout, all the bosses are vastly faster than you, and there's no checkpoint between the two halves of the fight. You pretty much can't afford to tank any damage if you want a snowball's chance in hell of surviving any boss battle. So if you don't figure out the exact strategy around every boss's attacks, memorize and dodge their hits perfectly, and figure out the exact attacks that they're vulnerable to, as well as the precise timing to land said hits, then you're going to be stuck on these levels for a long, long time. But alas, Hulk escapes the military base, and you pick back up at Alcatraz like the last hour or so didn't happen. Every single room has endlessly respawning enemies that you can just run right past with no penalty. Almost entire stages can be jogged straight through with no resistance. Because at this point, I don't even think that the game wants you playing this game. There's even an underground cave segment where 6 Hulk doggos attack you at once, and actually bothering to fight them just makes more respawn frickin' immediately until there's 6 again. Why even have combat at this point? Oh, and some of the rooms have fuse boxes powering shields that you need to smash. Good luck doing so, because the lock-on system will stubbornly refuse to lock onto the one thing that needs to be locked onto! A bomb turns you back into Bruce for the most pointless stealth level where you have to sneak past all of one enemy. And then you finally meet the leader, the main villain who's been mentioned all of twice, and you don't know a single thing about. And congratulations! The remainder of the game is a boss gauntlet that'll have you pulling your hair out!
Well, theoretically anyway. Oh,
Your first opponent is Ravage, the evil doctor from the beginning. Ravage is much faster than you, there's no good way to avoid damage, and he only takes hits when he feels like it. At complete random and without warning, he'll just shrug off all your attacks and slam you for tons of health. Throwing objects at him is the only reliable way to deal damage, except that's near impossible since Hulk takes his dear sweet time to pick up shit while Ravage runs up and decks you. They pitch you like this is meant to be a one-on-one even fight that takes clever strategy, but you're so badly overmatched that it's just friggin' sad. Nothing works on him! I don't want to hear shit ever again about how She-Hulk being able to fight is bad writing when every dude Hulk clone who's had their powers for 10 minutes is consistently able to obliterate him without objection. Ravage was a bookworm scientist in a wheelchair before this, and now he's this brilliant street fighter? So you wanna know how you defeat Ravage? The only attack that consistently works is a jumping ground pound move that the game never tells you that you have, or so much as hints at how to use it. At this point, I seriously had to look up a walkthrough just to learn the basic controls, because there are so many combat moves that the game never teaches you. There are 2 ground pound moves, one of which can be used in midair and charged to make debris fall in certain areas, but there's also a dashing attack. You can add pauses in your punches for longer combos. There's an uppercut move. There are special kinds of throws. You can charge your jumping punch into a vicious ranged attack that's super accurate with a lock-on, and the game tells you none of this! The bosses are hard-coded to only be vulnerable to moves that you don't even know exist! That is a special kind of spiteful game design! And don't even mention reading the instruction booklet. I bought 2 used copies of Hulk, and neither came with instructions. In fact, out of all the used games I've bought for this show over the years, the one that I remember actually having the instructions was Batman Dark Tomorrow. Basically, if you don't have a manual or a guide to look up the game's movesets, you're fucked! Game over! And no, the new moves that I learned about don't make the main combat any better. The ground pounds barely seem to affect normal enemies, and the aerial charge moves are crazy easy for enemies to interrupt. These attacks only seem to exist to fight the end bosses that are immune to everything else. Bruce heads to the leader's hideout where you have to fight Half-Life and Madman at the same time as an opposing force. No joke, the widely accepted strategy for winning this fight: is to run in giant circles doing the ground pound and just hope that the falling debris from the ceiling damages the bosses on accident. There is a kind of interesting cutscene where the leader uses the Gamma Orb to fully remove the Hulk's powers, and the first thing Bruce does is take the Hulk back. It might have been an interesting character exploration if it lasted for longer than 10 seconds.
This isn't your power. It's my curse, and I'm taking it back.
Also, if the Gamma Orb really is capable of killing the Hulk once and for all, why didn't Ravage just, do that at the start of the game? The leader actually isn't very hard. He warps around firing lasers that you learn to dodge really quickly, and he's vulnerable to the flying punch homing attack. Plus, he's nice enough to heal you when you kill his illusion clones. The hard part comes in the second phase, where he keeps calling maulers with big-ass laser rifles as backup, an enemy type so busted that I only even came close to winning this fight by running away, ignoring the goons, and just hoping I could finish off the leader while dodging them. Hulk destroys the Gamma Orb, the base starts to collapse, and the leader gets away scot-free. Yeah, the main villain escapes with only a minor setback. Aren't you glad you stuck it out through the rest of this game? And then Madman stops you on the way out of the base for a final battle, in which he spews cheap damage moves that annihilate your health bar in a very small arena with nowhere to dodge. Cheesing the living hell out of the charging air punch to float over all his attacks is your best bet, because screw trying to play this crap legitimately. Hulk escapes the collapsing base. I think we see Crawford failing to reproduce his Gamma Orb. You're given no context for what we're watching. General Riker, who I just realized we never actually directly fought, finally realizes that they can just study their own Gamma-powered soldier for the Hulk's powers. Brilliant! And Bruce walks off down a lonely road in a reference to the classic TV show. The end! And then Bruce and Betty got plastic surgery to turn into Edward Norton and Liv Tyler. Bruce went back to South America to hide, and he worked on a cure with another mad scientist who was also after the power of the Hulk. Then he got plastic surgery again to look like Mark Ruffalo and completely forgot that Betty exists, but he couldn't get his own movies anymore because Universal is keeping a death grip on the rights, so he poisoned his cousin into becoming She-Hulk instead. The licensed 2003 Hulk game is not very good. The combat is sluggish, clunky, annoying, and monotonous. The design is baffling between skippable encounters and never telling you how to fight properly. The boss battles are infuriating, and the plot is pretty much non-existent. But it has cheat codes for infinite health and weaker enemies, neither of which I used. It's still better than the Incredible Hulk movie licensed game with its hours of walking because its open world sucked. Plus, its developer Radical Entertainment moved on to bigger and better things with Infamous. I guess Hulk is harmless enough. And yes, I own the Incredible Hulk Ultimate Destruction game that everyone insists is the good one. I haven't played it yet, and these movie games suck enough without the comparison. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to go rue the fact that not only did I buy 2 copies of this crappy game, I also bought a copy of the crappy movie to make a stupid-ass joke about helicopters.
Why isn't the disc green?